Today I am showing you this branded or Despia budget deck. Now if you know or don't know, we basically had a long branded week. We started with an unboxing of the structure decks, then we put 3 structure decks together, so that's the most budget you can go essentially, no extras, just 3 structures, boom, you have a deck. Then I showed you a full power, just super upgraded expensive version, and now I'm showing you a budget version. So that is the deck right here. My goal was to have the deck be under $100 excluding the structure decks. So essentially you take the structure decks and then you put in about $100 worth of cards and that's it. My initial goal was for it to be $40 or so, but certain cards spiked too much, sadly, and so I had to change the strategy essentially. Now I know a lot of people have already made similar decks like this, but my primary concern with those is that they are sacrificing some of the most crucial cards, some of the biggest plays the deck have, and then they still spend a ton of money on all kinds of cards that have nowhere near as much impact and or might even be cut in the future. So you'll notice in some of the cards I chose and where I chose to spend the money that like, damn, that is one expensive card. But that one expensive card completely changes the deck. You know, ceiling wise, floor wise, it's just so crucial. And then later on, if you end up upgrading and spending more money, you will still be running that card, which is not the case for a lot of the budget videos I have been seeing so far. So without further ado, let's go into this deck. First of all, we have 3 Despian Tragedy right here. Despian Tragedy is one of the most important cards, and luckily it is a common. I will say I also calculated it all out, so you will actually know how much everything costed. The Despian Tragedy was 5 cents for a common. So these prices are based on whatever I found on TCG Player right now, except for one card. We will get into that later. I already know some people in the comments were going, oh, actually, this is so much. It's just at the time of making this video, cheapest price I can find, of course, and of course, shipping can make things more expensive, but hey, what are you gonna do? So Despian Tragedy, 3 copies at 5 cents. Now, if you end up upgrading this deck, you will go down to 2, but as you can see, I actually put in Allure of Darkness into the deck because it is a way to draw us our branded fusion more reliably, whilst also allowing us to banish the tragedy, so getting some actual real value out of the card that way. Because if it's sent to the graveyard or banished, you can add 1 Despia monster from your deck to your hand. You have a few targets in here, but the most important target very often will be this guy, Aluber, the Jester of Despia. I know this is a expensive card. It is, to me, far more impactful to have this absolute powerhouse available in the deck rather than spending like $5 here, $5 here, $5 here. By the end of it, your deck is full of budget dogshit cards that you then end up throwing away anyway. Whereas here, you have like 1 expensive card, sure, but boom, it completely changed the deck. And because we run like plenty of cards that lead to it, it's very worth it even at 1. Triple Tragedy will get us there, and it's only 5 cents. Next up, we have 3 Spring and Skid. Spring and Skid is basically a searcher for branded fusion. Because we don't have the money in this budget deck for branded opening, we want to run a couple cards that lead to branded fusion. You also saw me talk about that in the 3 structure decks together. That's also why we're still running this guy. We just want as many options as possible to lead to branded fusion, and Spring and Skid is a great way to do that. Luckily, he can do even more than that as well. Like, there's plenty of extra plays that Spring and Skid will allow you to do, and plenty of things you can search if you already opened the fusion. So triple Spring and Skid. Now in a full power version, this will probably go down to 1 or 0, but we gotta work with what we have. It's also great that this is in the structure deck, so you're not really losing any money. Next, we have Mercourier. Once again, in a full power version, you probably go down to 1 or 0 of this card, but given that it's a budget version and it's in the structure deck, there's a pretty solid hand trap that also lets you plus. If it's banished, you can add something from deck to hand. Next, we have Branded Fusion. This is the card it's all about. If you could play a deck with 6 Branded Fusions or 9 Branded Fusions, you would. This card is the whole reason the deck even exists. Next, we have Branded in Red. This was another card that wasn't in the structure deck, but is absolutely crucial. I see again a lot of budget versions versions going, oh, we're not going to run this card, and then instead they run other stuff, but it's like, no, you need the Branded in Red. So Branded in Red is a $3 card, meaning at 2 copies we are spending $6 for it, but it is very crucial in order to be able to fuse on our opponent's turn. Very, very impactful card. Also a branded card, so you can in fact search it. Next we have Branded Lost. This again searchable because we run branded searchers, and then it basically stops your opponent from interrupting branded fusion plays. This is actually really impactful in this deck in particular because we don't have the money for Crossout Designator. So normally if you activate something like branded fusion and they activate something to stop that, then you're just kind of boned, right? But if you were able to search your Lost, now you don't get boned by negates quite as much. Next we have Despia Theater of the Branded. This is essentially a polymerization for the deck that also has an extra effect beyond that. Next we have double Fallon of Albaz. Fallon of Albaz is required for the deck. Also the Despia Theater of the Branded, I believe, is a couple cents. Yes, 10 cents a copy, so you're totally fine spending that. And then we have one Ad Libitum. Once again, a really big increase in the ceiling of the deck, and it is a mere 50 cents. So at 1 copy, cool. If you wanted to, say you don't want to spend the money on the Aluber or something like that, you could play a second Ad Libitum. You would be making the deck less consistent and less good, but hey, it's at least a replacement, let's say, for the Aluber for now. It's not the same thing though, be aware of that. Next we have one Albion, once again, a good little boy, and it's in the structure deck anyway. Now for our hand traps, I stuck to the hand traps that were in the structure deck because again, I assume if you're making a branded budget deck, at least you're gonna have these. I didn't want to put in 3 Ashes and suddenly spend like $60 on these. I've also seen like budget builds use like Ghost Bell, and while Ghost Bell is an awesome hand trap, she's like $7 or something like that. That's 21 of the budget. Let's not do that for that reason. The hand traps here are definitely not optimal. Like you would probably want the Ash and or the Ghost Bell. Maybe even DD Crow you could try to fit in, though I really like having a few more light targets in the deck. Ghost Ogre is especially good against the Brave engine, which is still being ran in a lot of stuff. And again, it being a light does help a lot. Effect Failure, you know, nicely generic, and again, it being a light helps a lot. Next we have Forbidden Chalice. This is essentially a scuffed Forbidden Droplets. A lot of people I saw were saying, oh, you should run Super Poly, you should run Super Poly, and Super Poly is an awesome card for sure, but it's really expensive. If you look up Super Poly right now, it's what, 7, 9, 11 bucks? That would be like a third of our budget right there in one card. I would much rather have a slightly better in-engine card like an Aluber at 1 than a Super Poly at 3. So for that reason, 3 Chalice, very cheap card. I think Chalice here was $1.59, so 3 times makes it $4.77 to have ourselves a playset of Chalice, which is basically just, you know, a scuffed Droplets. Next we have a Called by the Grave. This card is nuts, and it is much cheaper than Crossout. It's limited for a reason, and it is a mere 0.45 cents at the time of making this video. If we could run more, we would. It's definitely better than Crossout, but here we are, we have our Call by. Next we have Allure of Darkness. Now you wouldn't be running this in the final build if you were to fully upgrade it, but given that we don't have the branded opening, so we are desperately just looking for ways to get to branded fusion, Allure of Darkness is a pretty good way. We do run enough darks to just keep on digging and get some value out of it, and again, banishing the tragedy is especially fun for us. So yeah, Allure, it's also very cheap. It's 50 cents. We need 3. That's $1.5 right there. Next we have Branded Retribution. Again, you don't run this in the final upgraded build, but it is another interruption that you can run in the cheaper build. You know, we can surge this in a variety of ways in the deck, and so having access to potentially an extra interruption in an overall weaker deck is pretty solid. Next, this one. This is probably the card in the deck I hate the most, but I want to call it Discount Aluber. We are essentially using this to look for branded fusion, and we pray that this doesn't get ashed or something like that. That is literally it. Just like in the 3 structure decks together, we have our Spring and Skit, we have our branded fusion, and this is the 7, 8, and 9th copy of the branded fusion. It's not as good, but what are you gonna do? Without opening is like $13 a piece right now. This is like the next best thing, and we at least do have it from the structure deck already. Next we have Aluber, the good boy. Aluber is $25 on Gamer's Choice as of right now. If those go out of stock, it does go up again. With that being said, if this big store was able to sell them at 25, that means they have information as far as pull rates go and so forth that indicate that this is a reasonable price for the card, because Ghost from the Past 2 again is reprinting it. So it was 25 for the reprint of Ghost from the Past 2, and that is coming out next week. Do not buy a Luber for $55 or $60, you know, the secret version, when Ghost from the Past 2 is coming out next week. On pre-sale on TCG Player, it's currently $44. I wouldn't buy that either. I believe that since Gamer's Choice was able to do it for $25, it will be around $25 once all of that supply hits the market. So many people are opening this product to pull Ghost Rares. Odds are pretty good that you'll be able to get it around that ballpark. Now, if it goes for sale for 30 or something, sure, maybe consider it. But again, be aware, once supply starts hitting the market, you know, we have release in an extra week or so, it should be at a reasonable price. So I'm already pricing that in. Of course, if this is $60, we're over the $100 budget. But if it's at 25, we're still nice below it. If it's $30, we're still nice below the $100 budget. So for that reason, in my spreadsheet, this is $25, but even at 30, it's still fine. Again, crucial card. This is the card for the deck. You want to be able to get it in a variety of ways. If we had branded opening, it would be even better, but we don't. So instead, we can only just get it from our Despian Tragedy right here. And again, this is one of those cards where I'm like, cool, it's not a budget card, but if you end up upgrading, you at least keep it. Again, there's so many people out there making budget versions of this deck, and they tell you to buy like $8 cards, $5 cards, and so forth. And then the second you start upgrading, you cut them all. That's awful. This one you won't be cutting. There is no way in hell you're cutting this card. Next, we have One Foolish Burial. This card is essentially a way to get rid of a Despian Tragedy, which means you get an Aluber. So this is an extra copy of Aluber, just like that. And again, it's a common, so very cheap. I think it's like a couple cents right here. Yeah, 5 cents or something. Now, the side is obviously not a real side. This is just upgrade paths and then extra options, but we'll get into that later. So you can ignore the side for now. This is not a real side. For the extra, we have 3 Albion. Again, also, if you're waiting for combos and so forth, I already showed you some basic combos in the 3 structures together video. But if you want like a super in-depth crazy combo guide, let me know that as well in the comments down below. So we have 3 Albion, it's in the structure deck. We have 3 Mirror Jade, it's in the structure deck. We have 3 Lubellion, it's in the structure deck. Now, if you have a higher budget, obviously you're gonna be running less copies of this. You might run 2 of each, and then you have more room for other cards. But again, some of these have been spiking like crazy because everyone is loving this archetype. So we had to get a little spicy, you know. So 3-3, and then we get to the most controversial card. I can already smell people in the comments going, "Oh, Guardian Chimera, that's not budget. Guardian Chimera isn't budget." You need to run Guardian Chimera. Don't try. Stop. Guardian Chimera is the reason this deck exists. Guardian Chimera is the best boss. Okay, Mirror Jade is amazing. Mirror Jade, okay, Mirror Jade, you'll get the throne. That's fine. But Guardian Chimera is Mirror Jade's dog. You need Guardian Chimera. I know it is $55. I think I saw it for 52 even. It's around that price. I know. It is definitely eating up half the budget. But once you start upgrading, you'll need this. It is the first upgrade you make. It is so important that you are able to make this on your opponent's turn. I will gladly spend half the budget on this card because it won't be cut, unlike a lot of the other jank you could be buying right now. Beyond that, just the inclusion of this one card pushes up the deck so much more than anything else. You could put in 10 cards in here that are $5 each, and they would have nowhere near the impact of this incredibly ridiculous card. So for that reason, yes, we are running one Chimera. Yes, it took up half the budget. It's that good. You run it. There's no way around it. You want to make a $30 version of this deck? Good luck, but you're turning it from an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 into a 2 out of 10. Just like that. That is how good this card is. I don't want to be mean. I just want to be real. Big card. Branded in red is in here for a reason. Next, we have Starving Venom Fusion. Now, you can ask yourself the question, why the hell are we playing Starving Venom and Dragos Tapella in this deck when you don't have Super Poly? And the reason is we have Fallen of Albas. Now, of course, do these cards, Starving Venom and Dragos Tapella, get better with Super Poly? Absolutely, they get so much better. But Super Poly is very expensive. Could you cut your Guardian Chimera and play 3 Super Poly? Sure, but your deck would be much worse. So I would rather, you know, have these niche options, which are very cheap, by the way. Starving Venom is $2.55 and we have one copy, and Dragos Topella is $0.37. So again, one copy together, that's 3 point something. Very cheap, and we have access to basically clearing our opponent's board and getting some value out of it. Also, we can actually make Dragos Topella in engine. We don't actually need our opponent's board for Dragos Topella, but you know, it's cool if we can do it off the Fountain of Albaz. Doesn't have to, but you know, again, just some cheap options in the deck. Next, we have Despian Proskenion. Again, outside of the structure deck, this card is 0.21 cents, so pretty nice. I also was looking at a Masquerade, and that card went from $7 to 22, so too bad, even though Masquerade is an incredible card. I looked at Quairitis or something like that. I thought, oh, this is gonna be $2. Nope. Quairitis is now like 8 again, so sadly couldn't run it. But this guy is still very, very cheap at 20 cents. So Despian Proskenion it is. Solid card though, like even some high power, full power versions run this card. It's just that, you know, some of the other choices here would have definitely liked to have some Masquerade in here. Next, we have Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon. Once again, this is already in the structure deck. And then we have our Brigrant the Glory Dragon. Now, if you don't want to buy Starving Venom because you think $2.55 isn't worth it, you can also put in the Titanic Lad that you get in the structure deck. Not bad at all. You know, there's nothing wrong with having an extra that's just completely the structure deck cards plus Guardian Chimera. You're gonna cheap out on a Luber? Fine. I can live with you cheaping out on a Luber. You want to cheap out on some of the other cards? Cool. But you're getting a Guardian Chimera. End of story. It shot up for a reason. I bought mine when they were 20. I know some people bought them even cheaper than that. It is what it is. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, next for the side. The side is essentially everything to the left of the Blue Eyes. Of course, Blue Eyes is not in this deck, but everything to the left of the Blue Eyes is stuff we want to upgrade. And everything to the right of the Blue Eyes is some engines that people have been running. We'll go over that right now. So first of all, branded opening. This is probably going to be one of the first things you end up buying once you start upgrading this deck further. So, you know, if we have the option, obviously we buy the branded openings and we start cutting some of the other cards. Whether it's the Allures might go out, the Keeper of Dragon Magic might go out, maybe the multiple copies of the Kits and the Mercuryers and so forth. You know, you start cutting some of those cards, maybe even Theater might go out. You start putting in branded opening because branded opening is your way of usually searching a Luber, which then leads to branded fusion and so forth. Very solid card. Next, a Luber. Obviously, having more Lubers in the deck is very solid. It gets you all of your plays. So for that reason, that's the second card you would be looking at. Now, you don't need to go in this order per se, but it's a pretty decent order. So we had our branded opening at 3. A Luber, you can go to 2 copies or so. Some people are playing 3, not bad necessarily. Next, we have another Guardian Chimera. This card is so good that yes, we go for a second copy. Yes, it's starting to get expensive. It is what it is. But again, this is just when you want to start splurging extra money. Guardian Chimera, incredible boss monster for the deck. Then Super Poly. Super Poly is pretty solid. Now, I do have to say, I was watching PAX video on the deck they were bringing to some big events, and they weren't running Super Poly anymore. So maybe it's not even that necessary. I don't know. Some people love this card. Some people say it's not required. You do you. I think it's pretty decent. And again, we already have the Starving Venom and Dragos Topella in here, so not too bad. Next, we have a Dramaturge. Not everyone actually runs this card, and I was pretty surprised to see this is like $9 right now. So, you know, the winner of the YCS, Lofton TCG, was running it, and he said it was very, very impactful. So you might want to consider it, but there's also a lot of lists that did really well that weren't running it. So maybe you want to cut it, up to you. Then we have one Despian Quairitis or something, again around $10 right now. I see some lists running it, some lists don't, but it's another option. Then we have Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom was, I think, peaking at $20 even for the common, but it is getting a reprint in the tins coming out this summer. So you might want to wait for that and then put it in. It is a really, really good hand trap. It does stop a lot of the stuff this deck does. Now, that's also the reason that people are playing Called By and Cross Out and the Brave engine. So Ash, you know, solid hand trap, but do know a lot of people are trying to stop it already, but they are trying to stop it for a reason. It is really good against the deck and a variety of other decks. So, you know, if you can upgrade to Ashes or you already have Ashes from other decks, certainly run them. You know, cut maybe a Veiler, cut maybe a Ghost Ogre, cut maybe a Chalice. You know, you do whatever you want to do to run your Ash. Then we have Cross Out. As I said, this deck can die to Ash if it doesn't have an answer for it. If you go Branded Fusion and they go Ash Lamao, it's done. Sorry, bro. Or maybe you Alluber to go for your Branded Fusion and the Ash Dad, or you go for Keeper of Dragon Magic or Spring and Skid to find Fusion and the Ash Dad. You know, whatever they may do, Ash does hurt the deck. And so by being able to Cross Out and stop their Ash from resolving, it does help the deck a lot. And so so a lot of the topping lists were running crossouts. Then Blue Eyes White Dragon, of course, a powerful Despia card. No, so this is just a little divider to make it clear for people. Can't wait for some people in YouTube comments to go crazy for this one. Then we have extra engines that I'm seeing people run. Now that doesn't mean they are good. I think whenever a new deck comes out, everyone and their mom goes, wow, this must be awesome with Invoked. I'm gonna splash in Invoked. Bah, bro, I love Invoked. Alistair, normal summon, blah, blah, blah. Every deck out there has an Invoked version. If you are a big fan of Invoked cards, and of course they do have some fusion stuff going on, go ahead and run it. It's not bad to put in an Invoked engine, but I definitely do not think it is optimal. So, you know, if you're trying to be budget, I would not start splurging on Invoked cards. I would definitely start splurging on some of the things we've talked about here before going crazy with like the weirder engines. Similar story for like Dogmatica and so forth. Another engine I see people splashing is Shadow's. Again, it's solid. I think it has a place, but I don't think it's optimal either. But I won't fault you. Again, there's some really cool Shadow cards out there. They also fuse a bunch. It works together. You know, there's some synergies, but I don't feel it's optimal. Then we have the Brave engine. Now, there is a inherent anti-synergy with Brave and Despia in the sense that you can't resolve a Luber if you normal summoned it. So that kind of hurts. However, the Brave engine is broken as hell, and it also stops hand traps with Griffin, making you not lose to Ash. There's pros out there, winning the YCS, for example, without a Brave engine, but then you also have, for example, Team Luxury, who had a bunch of people topping that weekend with the Brave engine. So, which is optimal? You tell me. Both will work, clearly. I personally am a fan of the Brave engine. I think stopping your opponents from hand trapping you is absolutely cracked, but I also understand that, you know, having the ability to normal summon a Luber to get your branded fusion might make your deck more consistent, but again, weaker to hand traps. So it is what it is. There's also some other plays they can do. If you use the Brave engine, you can Link Spider the token and then make a Verte, which means you get into your fusing stuff. It is what it is. Draco back is also broken. The whole engine is insane. It's been in every topping list for a reason. Next, we have the Edge Imp Chain engine. If you don't know what that is, essentially you have Edge Imp Chain and then you have this thing, Fright for Patchwork. And so essentially you discard your Edge Imp Chain for some effect, and then you get to search for a Patchwork, and then you activate Patchwork, and it looks for another Edge Imp and a Polymerization. This way, you're basically getting rid of all these crazy discard costs the deck has. You're also getting a new monster which you can fuse, for example, Guardian Chimera or other stuff along those lines. You're basically not minusing quite as much, and you're getting a Poly, which is great follow-up play. So overall, it just works together very well. And again, we saw some topping lists run it, others don't. So is it optimal? Kind of up in the air. You know, people will optimize this deck as time goes on. But if I had to, you know, start gambling and guessing which engine is going to be, you know, the mainstay for this deck, I would start looking towards Brave and or the Edge Imp one rather than the Invoked and the Shadow. They are cool. There's a lot of fans out there who just want to run these. Go ahead. But I definitely think if we see extra engines splashed, competitively speaking, it's probably going to be one of these two or both. That is the deck. This is the budget list. This is total $93.7 as of the making of this video if you already have the structure decks. So I guess the final price would be like $123 or so. Hope you found this very interesting. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments down below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.